They called 911 on the man who owned the entire lake. I inherited 3,600 acres expecting to spend a quiet Thanksgiving honoring my grandfather. Instead, I found an HOA throwing a holiday party on my private lakeshore, calling me a trespasser, and dialing 911 in front of hundreds of people. What none of them knew was that one forgotten boundary marker was about to expose a lie buried for years. Stay with me until the end, because this story doesn't end at the gate. It ends in a courtroom. And if stories of courage, land, and justice mean something to you, consider subscribing so you don't miss what's coming next. Why would an HOA call the police on the man who owned the entire lake? That was the question running through my mind as I slowed my pickup to a stop in front of a black iron gate that had no business existing. 3 weeks earlier, I'd buried my grandfather. A week after that, his attorney handed me the keys to a ranch I hadn't visited in nearly 15 years, 3,600 acres stretching across western Montana, complete with a private lake, timber, grazing land, and enough shoreline to disappear into silence for days. I had driven nearly 12 hours expecting an empty ranch house, a weathered fence, and a quiet Thanksgiving spent honoring the man who had taught me that land never forgot who cared for it. Instead, I found valet parking. Luxury SUVs lined a freshly paved entrance road that had once been nothing more than a dirt trail leading to the lake. Decorative lanterns hung from cedar posts. Beyond the gate stood white event tents, polished wooden pavilions, and rows of picnic tables covered in Thanksgiving dinners. Children chased one another across a lawn that should have been native grass. Music drifted over the water. I remembered fishing with my grandfather. A large banner stretched across the entrance, Timber Ridge. A Thanksgiving celebration. I looked from the banner to the deed folder sitting on the passenger seat. Wrong address? Wrong ranch? No. The GPS matched the legal description my grandfather's attorney had emailed me. This was the southern entrance to Mercer Ranch. Someone had simply built an entire community gathering place where my family had owned land for decades. I climbed out of the truck. Before I reached the gate, a man wearing a bright yellow security vest stepped directly into my path. "Residents only," he said. "I don't live here. Then you'll need to leave. I own this property." His expression shifted from routine confidence to polite disbelief. "I'm sorry?" I said. "I own this property." He glanced toward my pickup, then back at me. "Sir, this recreation area belongs to Timber Ridge Homeowners Association. It belonged to my grandfather for 40 years. He touched the radio clipped to his shoulder. "I've got someone claiming ownership at the south gate." I folded my arms and waited. There was no point arguing with someone repeating instructions. As a former Army Corps engineer, I'd spent years resolving disputes over easements, flood control, and property boundaries. The fastest way to lose credibility was losing your temper before you had your facts organized. Still, it was difficult watching families laugh around my lake while being told I didn't belong there. A few minutes later, conversations began to quiet. People turned to look. Then she appeared. Perfect posture, tailored cream coat, confident smile. She walked with the certainty of someone who had never expected to be questioned. "I'm Diane Holloway," she announced before she even reached me. "President of Timber Ridge HOA." She looked me over once, dismissively. "You're trespassing." I almost smiled. "On my own ranch? This is private community property." My grandfather would disagree. "I'm afraid the county records do not." She said it so smoothly that several nearby residents nodded, as though the matter had already been settled. "I inherited this ranch less than a month ago," I replied. 3,600 acres. She folded her hands. I'm aware someone inherited land north of here. This isn't north. It is according to the recorded boundary. No, I said evenly. It's according to whatever paperwork convinced you this lake belonged to your HOA. For the first time, the smile tightened. We've maintained this recreation area for years. Maintenance doesn't create ownership. A few nearby conversations stopped completely. People were listening now. Diane reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. With practiced movements, she opened a scanned document. A recorded boundary adjustment, she said. Your grandfather agreed to it years ago. She held the screen toward me. The signature looked familiar enough to fool someone who had never watched my grandfather write. But I had. Something about it felt wrong, too smooth, too careful. I'd like to see the original. The county has it. Then I'll request it. You can certainly try. There it was. Not confidence. Dismissal. The confidence of someone who believed the paperwork could never be questioned. She stepped back and addressed the security guard. Call the sheriff. Several people nearby exchanged uneasy looks. One older resident quietly asked, "Is he really the owner?" Diane answered before I could. No. The guard spoke into his radio. Possible trespass at the south entrance. I stood exactly where I was. I hadn't crossed the gate. I hadn't raised my voice. If they wanted to involve law enforcement, I preferred witnesses. 15 minutes later, a county SUV rolled to a stop. Sheriff Cole Bennett stepped out. Gray hair, weathered face, the expression of a man who had spent decades separating facts from accusations. He listened to Diane first. She spoke quickly, confidently. This individual is disrupting a private HOA event and refuses to leave. Then he turned toward me. Your side? My name is Ethan Mercer. I handed him my driver's license and the inheritance paperwork from my attorney. My grandfather passed away last month. He studied the documents carefully. You have a deed? The certified copy is being recorded. These are probate documents. He nodded slowly, then looked toward Diane. And your ownership documents? We have recorded boundary adjustments. With you? They're available through the county. Sheriff Bennett looked from her to me, then toward the crowd watching the exchange. Finally, he sighed. This isn't a criminal trespass. Diane frowned. But this is a property dispute. He doesn't belong here. He hasn't entered your event. She opened her mouth again. The sheriff gently raised a hand. Ma'am, unless I have evidence someone is committing a crime, I'm not removing anyone from a public roadway. The silence around us deepened. He turned back to me. Mr. Mercer, if this land is truly yours, you'll need to prove it through county records. I intend to. He gave a slight nod. And if it isn't, I'll accept whatever the documents say. That answer seemed to surprise him. Good. He tipped his hat. Happy Thanksgiving. Then he climbed back into his SUV and drove away. Diane watched until the sheriff disappeared around the bend. When she looked back at me, the smile was gone. If I were you, she said quietly, I'd stop chasing old stories. I don't chase stories.
I'm done.
What do you chase? The truth. She turned without another word and walked back through the gate. The heavy iron doors swung shut. Music resumed. Children laughed. The celebration continued as though I had never existed. I stood there another moment before heading toward my truck. Halfway there, something caught my eye. Near one of the decorative stone planters, partially buried beneath fresh landscaping rock, lay a rusted steel monument. Most people would have mistaken it for scrap metal. I didn't. Army Corps projects had taught me exactly what government survey monuments looked like. This one had been pulled out of the ground, deliberately. I crouched beside it. Beneath the dirt, I could still make out faint stamped lettering from an old federal survey. Someone hadn't just built over my family's land. Someone had moved the line itself. I stood slowly, looking from the buried monument to the crowded lakeshore beyond the gate. For the first time that day, I stopped wondering whether there had been a mistake. There hadn't. Someone had planned this, and I intended to find out exactly when they started. I took one last look at the overturned survey monument before climbing back into my truck. I didn't drive toward a hotel. I drove north, deeper into Mercer Ranch, following the gravel road that my grandfather had used long before Timber Ridge HOA existed. If the truth still lived anywhere, it would be waiting inside the old ranch house. The cabin hadn't changed much. The porch sagged in the same place I remembered. The workshop still leaned slightly toward the cottonwoods. Inside, dust covered the furniture, but everything remained organized with my grandfather's usual precision. He believed paperwork outlived memory. Standing in that quiet house, I suddenly understood why. I started with the office. His desk sat beneath the front window overlooking the pasture. The top drawer held ordinary things: pens, receipts, a flashlight with dead batteries. The bottom drawer was locked. The key was taped beneath the desktop, exactly where he used to hide it. Inside was a large manila envelope labeled in thick black marker. Property, do not discard. My pulse quickened. I spread everything across the desk. The original warranty deed, transferring the entire 3,600 acres into my grandfather's name decades earlier. County tax receipts, year after year, showing taxes paid on the full acreage without interruption. Water rights certificates covering the lake and creek. Hand-drawn parcel maps with government survey references written neatly in the margins. Nothing suggested any portion had ever been sold. Nothing. Then I unfolded a smaller piece of paper. It wasn't legal paperwork. It was a note, written in my grandfather's uneven handwriting. If they move the canyon markers, they'll steal everything. I kept every record. Don't let paper beat the truth. I read it twice. He knew. Maybe not everything, but enough to realize someone was trying to rewrite the property itself. My phone buzzed. Franklin County records had closed for the holiday weekend. Waiting until Monday would waste precious time. There was only one person I trusted to read land documents better than I could. Rebecca Sloan. I'd met her years earlier while consulting on a reservoir easement dispute. She specialized in property litigation and had a reputation for treating survey maps like crime scenes. She answered on the second ring. Ethan, I need help. That doesn't sound optional. It isn't. An hour later, she arrived carrying a leather case already filled with reference books and a laptop. She barely said hello before examining the deed. The paper is authentic, she said. The signatures? Original. She moved through the tax receipts next. They never reduced the taxable acreage. What does that tell you? If your grandfather transferred lakefront property to the HOA, the county should have adjusted the assessment. She flipped through another stack. They didn't. Hope replaced the frustration I'd carried since leaving the gate. So Diane lied? Rebecca looked up. I don't know if she lied. What's the difference? Sometimes people repeat paperwork they've never questioned. She tapped the deed. But this document says your grandfather owned everything until the day he died. I showed her the photograph I'd taken of the survey monument lying beneath the landscaping stones. Her expression changed immediately. Can you zoom in? I enlarged the image. She leaned closer. That's not decorative steel. I know. That's a federal survey monument. It was ripped out. She nodded slowly. If that marker was moved, whoever did it wasn't landscaping. They were moving a legal boundary. Rebecca stood and walked to the window overlooking the distant tree line. Ethan, people fake signatures. They alter maps. They even misuse easements. But physically removing government monuments, she looked back at me. That's something entirely different. I handed her the photo of the scanned survey Diane had displayed on her phone. Rebecca enlarged the signature. What? I've never trusted photographs of legal documents. Why? They hide too much. She compared the scanned signature with the genuine signatures inside my grandfather's deed. For nearly a minute, she said nothing. Finally, she closed the folder. I won't accuse anyone of forgery without an examiner. But something about this bothers me. She opened her laptop and accessed the county recording index. Minutes passed, then her fingers stopped moving. That's impossible. What? The survey Diane mentioned is recorded. So? There should also be a matching easement agreement. There isn't? Rebecca slowly turned the screen toward me. I found the survey reference. She pointed to the empty space beneath it. But there is no recorded transfer, no deed, no easement, no supporting agreement. Nothing. The room suddenly felt very quiet. Outside, somewhere beyond the trees, families were probably finishing Thanksgiving dinner beside my lake. Inside the cabin, the paperwork told an entirely different story. Rebecca closed the laptop. If the county has no matching transfer, she looked directly at me. Then somebody built an entire community around a piece of land they may never have legally owned. I stared at my grandfather's handwritten note one more time. He hadn't been warning me about losing property. He'd been warning me about losing the evidence. And if the missing easement truly didn't exist, the fight had only just begun. Rebecca told me not to go back to the gate alone. That was good advice, which meant I planned to follow it exactly once. The next morning, she made the call to Owen Parker, a veteran surveyor who had spent 30 years settling boundary fights across Montana. By noon, his old white pickup rolled into my grandfather's yard with tripods, steel rods, field maps, and a face that looked permanently unimpressed. He stepped out, glanced at Rebecca, then at me. HOA? Yes, I said. He snorted. Figures. Owen didn't waste words. He asked for the original deed, the old parcel maps, and the photograph of the buried monument. 5 minutes later, he was already walking south through the timber with a GPS receiver in one hand and a faded county map in the other. Rebecca and I followed. The first marker should have been near a line of lodgepole pines above the lake road. Owen found the hole before he found the marker. He crouched, brushed dirt aside, and pointed. See the ring in the soil? I looked down. A dark circle marked where something heavy had once been set. That was a monument socket, he said. Steel posts sat here for decades. Could weather do that? Weather doesn't pull a post straight up and hide it under landscaping stones. He stood and looked toward the distant HOA gate. Show me the next point. We spent 6 hours walking ridge, timber, and shoreline. Owen moved with harsh precision, marking each original coordinate against the modern HOA layout. One monument had been bent and tossed into brush. Another lay buried near a drainage ditch. A third had been snapped off below grade. Every missing point told the same story. Not erosion, not accident, removal. By late afternoon, Owen planted his tripod near a rise overlooking the Timber Ridge Pavilion. Residents were visible below, still moving across the lakeshore, like it belonged to them. The Thanksgiving tents were gone, but the structures remained. Dock, pavilion, paved path, parking lot, and a polished sign reading Residents Only Lake Access. Owen stared through the instrument. Then he lowered his eye from the scope. Well, that's ugly. Rebecca stepped closer. How ugly? The original boundary runs south of the pavilion. Meaning, he pointed toward the lake. Meaning everything from that dock to that parking lot appears to sit inside Mercer Ranch. My mouth went dry. You're certain? I'm not done yet. That was Owen's way of saying yes. My phone buzzed before we reached the ranch house. An email, subject line, official notice of violation, Timber Ridge HOA. I opened it. Rebecca read over my shoulder. The notice accused me of harassment, intimidation of community staff, interference with HOA property, and unauthorized survey activity. Fine amount, $3,800. Payment due within 10 days. Failure to comply could result in legal action and a lien. I laughed once, but there was no humor in it. I'm not even in their HOA. Rebecca's face hardened. They know that. Then why send it? Pressure. Paper intimidation. They want you reacting emotionally instead of legally. A second email arrived, then a third. Residents I had never met had already started posting about me online. Screenshots showed Diane's statement in the Timber Ridge Community Forum. A non-resident claiming legacy ownership has begun disruptive activity near our recreation zone. The board is taking steps to protect community assets. Community assets. My grandfather's lake had become a phrase in someone else's newsletter. I shut the phone off. Owen packed his equipment in silence until he saw my face. Don't answer them, he said. I wasn't planning to. Good. Loud people hate quiet records. We spent the next 2 days building those records. Owen returned with assistance and a drone permit. Rebecca filed preservation notices, demanding Timber Ridge retain all documents tied to the 2016 boundary adjustment. I photographed every marker, every socket, every visible structure inside the disputed area. By Friday morning, Diane escalated. A certified letter arrived at the ranch house addressed to me by name. It ordered me to cease hostile surveying, stop communicating with Timber Ridge residents, and vacate all HOA-managed recreational land. It also warned that further interference could expose me to civil damages. Rebecca read the letter once. Then she smiled without warmth. They just admitted management. How does that help? They didn't claim ownership in this sentence. They claimed management. Lawyers noticed that. Owen returned that evening with preliminary data printed on oversized survey sheets. He spread them across the kitchen table and weighted the corners with coffee mugs. Red lines showed the original Mercer boundary. Blue lines showed the HOA's claimed line. The blue line didn't drift. It didn't curve. It cut cleanly across the ranch like a knife. Owen tapped the map. These missing monuments form a straight relocation pattern. Rebecca leaned forward. How much land? Too early for exact acreage. He drew a finger along the lakefront. But the shift favors Timber Ridge by more than 1,000 feet. The room went silent. Outside, the ranch was dark. Beyond the southern ridge, Timber Ridge's lights shimmered against the lake, bright and confident, sitting on borrowed ground. I looked at the map again. For 2 days, I'd wondered how deep this went. Now I had a better question. Who had enough power to move 1,000 feet of land and convince an entire community not to notice? Owen answered without looking up from the survey maps. Not one person. He ran a pencil across the blue boundary line the HOA had been using. This took a surveyor, someone willing to file paperwork, and someone confident nobody would challenge it. Rebecca nodded, which means we stop asking who benefited. She tapped the map. We start asking who signed. Monday morning found the 3 of us standing inside the Granite County Recorder's office before the doors had been open 5 minutes. Rebecca requested every document connected to Mercer Ranch and every filing attached to Timber Ridge's southern expansion. The clerk disappeared into the records room. When she returned, she carried a stack thick enough to fill half the counter. Everything before 2016 is straightforward, she said. After that, she hesitated. Rebecca noticed immediately. What's wrong? The clerk slid one document from the stack, a revised boundary survey. Owen took it first. His expression hardened. This is the one. Rebecca looked for supporting paperwork. Where's the deed transfer? The clerk frowned. There isn't one. The easement agreement? No. County commission approval? She shook her head. I don't see anything. Rebecca looked directly at her. A 1,200-foot boundary adjustment doesn't happen by itself. I know. The clerk lowered her voice. That's why I always thought this file looked incomplete. Owen spread the survey across the counter. The coordinates don't even match. Rebecca looked up. What? He pointed toward the legal description. They copied the beginning of the original survey. His finger slid farther down. Then they changed every monument reference after Station 14. The room became very quiet. The clerk swallowed. I've worked here 19 years. I've never seen anyone alter a property line that aggressively. Rebecca requested certified copies of every page. No shortcuts, no digital scans, certified originals. If this reaches court, she said, I want the judge holding the county's own records. Outside, Owen compared the revised survey to his field notes. He circled point after point in red. Every relocated monument lines up with structures the HOA later built. The pavilion, the boat dock, the parking lot, the walking trail. They didn't just move the line. They moved it exactly far enough to capture every valuable improvement. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered. No one spoke. Only breathing. Then the line disconnected. Rebecca noticed my expression. They know you're digging. They've known since Thanksgiving. No. She looked toward the recorder's office. Today they learned we have documents. Back at the ranch, Owen finalized his preliminary report. 3 large maps covered the dining table: original government boundary, current HOA boundary, actual field measurements. The difference wasn't a matter of inches. It was over 1,200 feet across the southern shoreline, more than enough to swallow the lake access, recreation area, and nearly every structure Timber Ridge proudly advertised to prospective homeowners. Owen signed the bottom of the report. I'll swear to this under oath. Rebecca slipped it into a litigation folder. So will the county records. Just after sunset, headlights appeared outside the ranch house. A black SUV rolled slowly into the driveway. No county markings, no license plate frame, only dark windows. The passenger stepped out wearing an expensive overcoat. He never offered his name. I'm here on behalf of Timber Ridge, I assumed. He smiled politely. My clients understand you've hired professionals. They're correct. We'd like to avoid unnecessary litigation. Rebecca remained beside me without speaking. The man glanced toward her briefcase. You've already spent considerable money. It'll get more expensive. I folded my arms. What exactly are you offering? A chance to walk away. Silence. He continued. The community has existed for years. Hundreds of families depend on those amenities. You could save everyone, including yourself, a great deal of trouble. Rebecca finally spoke. Interesting. He looked at her. You never said Ethan wasn't the owner. The man's smile faded for the first time. We're discussing practical solutions. No, Rebecca replied evenly. We're discussing legal ownership. He ignored the correction and turned back to me. Mr. Mercer, some truths cost more than land. He returned to the SUV. Within seconds, the vehicle disappeared down the ranch road without another word. Neither Rebecca nor Owen spoke until the dust settled. Finally, Owen broke the silence. They're scared. Rebecca nodded. They expected emotion. They found evidence. She looked toward the survey spread across the table. Tomorrow we file preservation notices. The day after that, she closed the litigation folder. We make sure nobody can pretend this survey never existed. I looked once more at the red and blue lines crossing my grandfather's land. For the first time since Thanksgiving, the balance had shifted. The HOA still had the buildings. They still had the residents. They still had the money. But now we had something far more dangerous. Proof. Most people think the moment you find evidence, you rush into court. Rebecca stopped me before I could make that mistake. Not yet, she said, sliding the certified records into a fireproof case. Right now they know we have questions. They don't know how much we know. So we wait? We work. For the next several days, we said almost nothing publicly. No interviews, no social media posts, no angry letters to the HOA. Instead, Rebecca filed preservation notices requiring Timber Ridge to retain every survey, board minute, invoice, engineering report, and email connected to the southern expansion. At the same time, she submitted requests to the County Planning Office, the Environmental Department, and the State Water Board. Every request had one purpose: force the paper trail to surface. The first response arrived from the County Planning Office. There was no approved site plan for the lakeside pavilion. The second came from the Environmental Department. No permit existed for shoreline grading along my lake. The third response surprised even Rebecca. The floating docks had never received final authorization because the ownership documentation submitted with the application consisted only of the disputed 2016 survey. She looked up from the letter. They built first, and nobody ever checked ownership. My phone remained silent for nearly 2 days. Then the pressure started again. An overnight envelope arrived from Timber Ridge's attorneys. Inside was a demand that I immediately stop interfering with community operations. Another accused me of damaging property values. A third threatened to seek attorney's fees if I continued false ownership claims. Rebecca stacked them neatly. They're throwing paper at you. I thought paper was dangerous. It is. She tapped our certified deeds, but only when it's true. The real escalation came online. Someone posted my photograph in the Timber Ridge Residents Forum. Warning: outsider trying to take our lake. Hundreds of comments followed. Some called me greedy. Some accused me of trying to force families from their homes. One woman wrote that she'd watched her grandchildren learn to fish on HOA property for 6 years. I stared at the screen for a long moment. None of those people knew they might have been standing on Mercer Ranch the entire time. Rebecca quietly closed my laptop. They're defending what they honestly believe. Diane made sure of that. Exactly. I didn't answer a single comment. That frustrated them more than any argument could have. 3 mornings later, Sheriff Cole Bennett pulled into the ranch driveway. He removed his hat before speaking. I'm not here because of a complaint. What then? I've received 6 calls asking why I haven't arrested you. I almost laughed. For what? Surveying. Rebecca stepped outside carrying a folder. We're surveying our own property. The sheriff accepted the certified survey report and studied the seal. Owen Parker signed this? He did. Cole Bennett knew the name. So do most judges. He handed it back carefully. I can't comment on an active dispute. I wouldn't ask you to. He hesitated. But I'll tell you this. I checked the old tax rolls after Thanksgiving. My attention sharpened. And? They've always listed Mercer Ranch as 3,600 acres. He looked toward the distant HOA entrance. I couldn't figure out why until now. He climbed back into his SUV without another word. His visit lasted less than 5 minutes. It was enough. Even the sheriff had started asking questions. That evening, Rebecca pinned every new document to a growing evidence board inside the ranch house. Missing permits, missing approvals, certified tax records, survey reports, threat letters, everything connected. Everything pointed toward one conclusion. The silence wasn't protecting the HOA anymore. It was trapping them. Just after midnight, my phone vibrated. Unknown number. One message. No greeting. No signature. Only a single sentence. I helped build their lie. We need to meet. I read it twice. Rebecca read it once. Then she looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen before. This isn't intimidation. What is it? She set the phone down slowly. It's someone inside Timber Ridge. For the first time, they're starting to crack. Rebecca insisted we choose the meeting place. No restaurants near Timber Ridge, she said. No county offices. Somewhere public enough to discourage games, but quiet enough for someone to speak freely. We settled on an old gas station cafe 20 miles outside town. I arrived early. At exactly 9 o'clock, a faded blue sedan pulled into the gravel lot. A man in his early 60s stepped out. His shoulders were slightly stooped, but his eyes never stopped scanning the parking lot. You Ethan Mercer? I am. He nodded once. My name's Daniel Brooks. He didn't offer a smile. I used to be secretary for the Timber Ridge HOA. Rebecca joined us at the table inside. Daniel waited until the waitress left, before placing a worn leather briefcase between us. I should have done this years ago. He unclipped the locks. Inside were neatly labeled folders, board meeting minutes, financial reports, construction invoices, email printouts, everything organized by date. Rebecca carefully lifted the first folder. Did you keep all this? I kept copies. Why? Daniel looked down at his coffee. Because things stopped making sense. He slid one email toward us. It was from Diane Holloway to several board members. The subject line read, South Expansion Schedule. Rebecca read silently. So they approved construction before the survey? Daniel nodded. Months before. I frowned. They already knew where they planned to build. They knew where they wanted to build. He corrected me. Not where they legally could. He handed us another folder. Budget approvals. Payments to contractors. Invoices for the pavilion. Dock materials. Road paving. Every approval came before any recorded county authorization. Rebecca looked at me. This destroys their claim of good faith. Daniel wasn't finished. They told homeowners the county had approved everything. Had it? No. They told the board? No. They told almost nobody. He removed another packet. Internal meeting minutes. One line had been highlighted. Delay notifying adjacent owner until boundary filing is complete. Rebecca read it twice. Adjacent owner. They wouldn't even write your grandfather's name. Daniel rubbed his forehead. Harold Mercer questioned construction once. What happened? Diane said he'd misunderstood the new survey. And? He was already sick. Daniel's voice lowered. Most people assumed he'd stop fighting. The words hung over the table. Not because they were dramatic, because they sounded practical, calculated. Rebecca quietly photographed every page. Can you testify to these records? Daniel answered without hesitation. Yes. What made you come forward now? He looked directly at me. Thanksgiving. I waited. I watched Diane call the sheriff on you. I watched you stand there without yelling. I realized you had no idea how long this had been happening. He took a slow breath. I couldn't keep pretending anymore. Rebecca closed another folder. This changes the lawsuit. Daniel nodded. It should. He reached back into the briefcase. I saved one thing that never made it into the official files. He placed a small flash drive on the table. No label, just worn black plastic. Rebecca picked it up carefully. What's on this? I've never listened to all of it. You should. It was copied from an old board meeting. When? About 8 years ago. Who recorded it? I honestly don't know. Someone slipped it into my mailbox after I resigned. I looked at the drive. Why keep it? Daniel gave a tired smile. Because I always thought one day someone would need the truth more than I needed peace. The cafe had grown strangely quiet. Outside, a truck pulled up to the pumps before driving away again. Daniel lowered his voice. If what's on that drive is what I think it is, he pushed the flash drive toward Rebecca. Then Diane Holloway has a problem bigger than losing land. Rebecca slipped it into an evidence bag without plugging it into a computer. We'll examine it properly. Daniel nodded approvingly. Chain of custody. Exactly. He gathered the empty folders but left the originals with us. As he stood to leave, he paused beside my chair. Ethan. I looked up. They didn't think your grandfather had anyone left. His voice carried more regret than anger. They thought time would bury the truth. After he drove away, neither Rebecca nor I spoke for nearly a minute. Finally, she held up the sealed evidence bag. We came here expecting a witness. What did we leave with? She looked at the flash drive. If this contains what Daniel believes, she carefully placed it inside her case. We just picked up the evidence that can bring their entire story down. I stared through the cafe window toward the highway, disappearing into the mountains. For the first time since Thanksgiving, I wasn't wondering whether we could prove the truth. I was wondering how Diane Holloway would react once she realized the truth had learned to speak. Rebecca refused to open the flash drive on her office computer. If this becomes evidence, she said, we do it the right way. She arranged for a certified forensic technician to create a verified copy while documenting every step. The original drive never left its evidence bag. By late afternoon, we sat around a conference table listening to the copied files through external speakers. The first recording contained nothing important. Budget discussions, maintenance contracts, landscaping. The second file was worse, mostly static. Then the third began. A woman's voice cut through the room. Calm, confident, unmistakable. Diane Holloway. We're all here? Several voices answered yes. Someone closed a door. Rebecca immediately paused the recording. Date? The technician checked the file metadata. Created 8 years ago. Rebecca nodded. Keep going. The conversation started with ordinary HOA business before shifting toward what Diane called the South expansion. A male voice asked, "What if Harold Mercer objects?" Diane laughed softly. "He won't." Another board member sounded uncertain. "How can you be sure?" "Because by the time construction is finished," Diane replied, "the improvements will already exist." Silence filled Rebecca's office. The recording continued. Courts hate removing completed community projects. Another voice asked, "Do we actually own that shoreline?" Diane answered without hesitation. "We will. After the survey, after enough time passes." A chair scraped across the floor. Someone sounded nervous. "What if Mercer hires a lawyer?" Diane's next sentence changed everything. "He's old, he's isolated, and he probably won't live long enough to stop us." Nobody spoke in Rebecca's office. The recording kept playing. Another man asked whether they should notify my grandfather before moving the boundary markers. Diane answered immediately. Absolutely not. If he complains now, construction slows. If he complains later, we already have precedent. Rebecca reached over and stopped the audio. The silence that followed felt heavier than anything I'd experienced since finding the buried monument. She looked at me. This isn't a boundary dispute anymore. I already knew. This is intentional fraud. She nodded. And conspiracy. The forensic technician quietly removed his headphones. I've authenticated the recording. No signs of editing. No splices. No interruptions. Rebecca asked him to prepare a sworn report before leaving. As soon as the door closed, she opened a fresh legal file. The title across the front read, Mercer versus Timber Ridge, HOA. She crossed it out. What are you doing? I asked. This case just changed. She wrote a new heading. Mercer versus Timber Ridge, HOA, Diane Holloway, and associated parties. They're no longer hiding behind the association. She spent the next 2 hours rewriting nearly every filing. Claims of negligent encroachment became intentional misrepresentation. Boundary error became fraudulent relocation. Civil trespass expanded into requests for punitive damages based on deliberate conduct. Every change was supported by evidence, not assumptions, not accusations. Evidence. Just before sunset, Rebecca called Sheriff Cole Bennett. She didn't ask for help. She asked him to preserve any prior incident reports involving Timber Ridge's southern expansion. He listened quietly, then asked one question. Did you finally find what you've been looking for? Rebecca glanced at me before answering. We found something better. We found motive. There was a long pause. I'll preserve every record. Thank you, Sheriff. News traveled faster than I expected. The following morning, another certified letter arrived from Timber Ridge's attorneys. This one sounded different. No threats, no fines. Instead, they requested a private settlement meeting before litigation moved forward. Rebecca smiled the moment she finished reading it. They're changing strategy. Because they know? They don't know exactly what we have. She folded the letter and placed it on top of the evidence file. But they know they're losing control. By evening, court filings had been completed. Every exhibit numbered, every affidavit signed, every certified record indexed. The survey, the deeds, the tax rolls, Daniel's documents, the authenticated recording. Months of deception had become boxes of organized evidence. Rebecca locked the files inside a rolling case. We file first thing Monday. I looked toward the ranch through the office window. The lake was hidden beyond distant ridges, but I could still picture the pavilion standing where my grandfather once tied his fishing boat. It won't be standing much longer. Rebecca closed the case. Neither will Diane's version of the truth. Court was only days away. The strange part wasn't that I felt nervous. It was that Diane Holloway almost certainly believed she was still walking into that courtroom as the winner. The Granite County Courthouse wasn't impressive. It didn't need to be. Truth had never required expensive buildings. Rebecca and I arrived before 8, carrying 2 rolling cases filled with certified records, survey maps, tax rolls, photographs, and sworn reports. Owen Parker met us outside carrying a long tube that held the final survey exhibits. You ready? He asked. I've been ready since Thanksgiving. He gave a quiet nod. Good answer. Inside the courtroom, Timber Ridge occupied nearly every bench. Homeowners whispered among themselves. Some recognized me from the gate. Others looked away as I walked past. They had spent years believing they owned the lake. Today, Many of them were about to learn they had trusted the wrong people. Diane Holloway entered last. She wore a navy suit instead of the cream coat I'd first seen at the gate, but the confidence was identical. Two attorneys followed her carrying slim binders. She caught my eye across the room and offered the same practiced smile she'd worn on Thanksgiving. It no longer carried any weight. Judge Helen Foster entered precisely at 9. The courtroom rose. She wasted no time. This matter concerns disputed property boundaries, alleged fraudulent land records, and claims of unauthorized construction. She looked toward Rebecca. "Counsel, you may proceed." Rebecca stood. "Your Honor, this case is not about misunderstanding a fence line." She placed the original Mercer deed on the evidence table. "It is about whether an organization knowingly occupied land it did not own." The clerk marked the exhibit. Rebecca continued methodically. Certified deed, certified tax history, county assessment records, water right certificates. Every document established the same fact. Mercer Ranch had remained 3,600 acres without interruption. Diane's attorney rose. "The HOA relied upon a recorded survey. We acted in good faith." Judge Foster simply replied, "You'll have an opportunity to present that argument." Rebecca called the first witness, Owen Parker. He stepped into the witness box carrying the certified survey. After taking the oath, he unrolled the large map across the display stand. "This is my independent boundary survey." Rebecca nodded. "What did you find?" "The original government monuments align perfectly with the 1984 Mercer deed. And the HOA survey? It does not." He used a pointer to trace the two lines. "The HOA boundary shifts more than 1,200 feet north. By accident? No." "Why not?" "Because every relocated point benefits the same property owner." He indicated the pavilion, then the dock, then the parking lot, then the shoreline trail. Each improvement sits inside the relocated boundary. Rebecca asked one final question. "What caused that shift?" Owen looked directly toward the judge. "Original survey monuments were deliberately removed." A ripple spread through the gallery. Diane's attorney approached for cross-examination. "Mr. Parker, isn't it true survey monuments sometimes move due to erosion?" "They can. So that's possible here?" Owen didn't hesitate. Steel monuments anchored in bedrock don't relocate themselves 1,200 feet. Several people in the gallery exchanged uneasy glances. The attorney changed direction. "You weren't present in 2016?" "No." "So you can't testify who moved them?" "No." "I can testify they were moved." The distinction landed harder than any argument. Rebecca called the next witness, a forensic document examiner. She displayed enlarged comparisons between my grandfather's genuine signatures and the one attached to the disputed survey. "Your opinion?" With a high degree of professional certainty, the signature on the 2016 survey was not naturally written. "What do you mean?" "It shows characteristics consistent with tracing." Diane shifted in her chair. For the first time since I'd met her, she wasn't smiling. Her attorney objected repeatedly. Judge Foster overruled each objection after confirming the examiner's qualifications. Rebecca never raised her voice. She didn't need to. Every answer narrowed the room around Diane. During a brief recess, Sheriff Cole Bennett quietly stepped beside me. "I've testified in a lot of cases." I looked at him. "This one feels different." "How?" "Usually people argue." He glanced toward Owen's survey still displayed for the court. "You people keep bringing documents." Before I could answer, the bailiff called everyone back inside. Rebecca gathered another evidence folder. As she stood, she leaned toward me. "We've established ownership. We've established the false survey. We've established the forged signature." I nodded. What's left? She looked toward the courtroom doors where someone had just arrived. Only one man carried a worn leather briefcase instead of a lawyer's binder. Daniel Brooks. Rebecca closed the folder. Now, she said quietly, we proved they knew exactly what they were doing. The courtroom settled back into silence as Daniel walked toward the witness stand. Every eye followed him, including Diane Holloway's. Daniel Brooks took the oath without looking in Diane's direction. His hands trembled slightly as he settled into the witness chair, but when Rebecca Sloan approached, his voice remained steady. Please state your name for the record. Daniel Brooks. Were you employed by Timber Ridge HOA? I served as board secretary for nearly 7 years. And during that time, did you attend executive board meetings? Almost all of them. Rebecca handed him a binder. Do you recognize these meeting minutes? I do. Why? I helped write them. She let that answer settle before asking the next question. Mr. Brooks, was the expansion onto the southern lakeshore presented to the board as legally owned property? Daniel looked toward the jury box before answering. No. A murmur spread through the courtroom. Rebecca continued. What was the board told? That ownership would catch up. Diane's attorney stood immediately. Objection. Calls for speculation. Judge Helen Foster looked at Daniel. Were those words actually used? Yes, Your Honor. Objection overruled. Rebecca displayed one of the internal emails Daniel had preserved. The screen showed Diane's message authorizing construction before legal documentation had been completed. Daniel identified it without hesitation. I received that email. Were board members concerned? Several were. What happened? Diane told everyone delays would only create unnecessary questions. Rebecca nodded. No further questions on the documents. She walked back to counsel table, then picked up the sealed evidence bag. The court has already admitted Exhibit 42. She carefully removed the authenticated copy of the audio recording. Mr. Brooks, have you listened to this recording? Yes. Do you recognize the voices? I do. Whose meeting was it? The Timber Ridge Executive Board. Rebecca turned toward the judge. Your Honor, with the court's permission. Judge Foster nodded. You may proceed. The speakers came alive. Static. A chair scraping across the floor. Then Diane's unmistakable voice. We're all here? Silence filled the courtroom. The recording continued. A board member asked whether construction should wait until ownership questions were resolved. Diane answered calmly. No. Another voice asked about my grandfather. Then came the sentence no one in the room would forget. He's old. He's isolated. He probably won't live long enough to stop us. No one moved. Not the judge, not the attorneys, not the spectators. Only the court reporter's fingers continued across the keyboard. The recording played on. What if he complains? We'll already have the improvements built. Court won't tear down an established community. Then another statement. Don't notify him until everything is finished. Rebecca stopped the recording. She didn't need another second. The damage had already been done. Diane's attorney rose slowly. He looked toward his client before speaking. Your Honor, his voice lacked the confidence it had carried that morning. We request time to review, Judge Foster interrupted. The recording has already been authenticated. He sat back down without finishing. Rebecca returned to Daniel. Mr. Brooks, in your opinion, was this an accident? No. Was it negligence? No. What was it? Daniel looked directly at Diane for the first time. It was a plan. Those 3 words landed harder than every exhibit that had come before them. Rebecca thanked the witness. Daniel stepped down. The courtroom remained silent. Even the Timber Ridge homeowners who had filled the gallery avoided looking toward Diane. She finally stood. "This recording lacks context." Judge Foster raised a hand. "You'll remain seated until recognized." Diane hesitated, then slowly lowered herself back into her chair. Her polished confidence had disappeared. For the first time since Thanksgiving, she looked exactly like what the evidence described. Not a confident community leader, someone running out of explanations. Judge Foster spent several quiet minutes reviewing her notes. No one dared interrupt. Finally, she closed the file. "I have heard sufficient testimony." She looked across the courtroom. "The evidence establishes a consistent pattern." She listed each point carefully. The original Mercer deed, the certified tax history, the independent boundary survey, the displaced government monuments, the forged signature, the internal communications, the authenticated audio recording. Each sentence tightened the silence. Judge Foster folded her hands. "I am prepared to issue my ruling." Across the courtroom, Diane closed her eyes. For the first time since I inherited Mercer Ranch, I felt no anger, only certainty, because truth had finally reached the one place it mattered most. The bench. Judge Helen Foster looked across the courtroom before delivering a single word. Judgment. No one moved. Not Diane Holloway. Not her attorneys. Not even the homeowners who had filled the gallery hoping the case would somehow disappear. Judge Foster opened the written order. "The court finds that Mercer Ranch has remained legally intact at 3,600 acres since its original conveyance." She held up the certified survey. "The 2016 boundary revision is declared invalid." Rebecca quietly closed her notebook. She already knew where this was going. The judge continued. "The evidence establishes that original government survey monuments were intentionally displaced. The disputed survey relied upon an inauthentic signature. The HOA's construction proceeded without lawful ownership of the affected shoreline." Every sentence stripped away another layer of Diane's authority. Then came the orders. "All notices, fines, assessments, and enforcement actions issued against Ethan Mercer are hereby declared void." I felt years of pressure leave my shoulders. Judge Foster wasn't finished. "Timber Ridge Homeowners Association shall remove every unauthorized structure located on Mercer Ranch within 90 days under county supervision." The courtroom erupted into whispers. The pavilion, the iron gate, the docks, the parking lot, the walking trails, everything built across my family's shoreline. Gone. The judge raised her hand for silence. "Plaintiff is awarded compensatory damages for unauthorized use of private property, restoration costs, and attorney's fees." She paused before reading the final paragraph. "The court further refers this matter to the appropriate prosecuting authority for review of potential criminal offenses relating to forged property records and related filings." Diane stood abruptly. "This ruling will destroy our community." Judge Foster met her eyes. "No, Ms. Holloway. Your decisions did that." Sheriff Cole Bennett stepped forward as Diane continued trying to speak. Her attorney quietly touched her arm. For the first time since Thanksgiving, she listened. Not because she agreed, because there was nothing left to argue. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited near the steps, but Rebecca guided me past them. "Not today." "Why?" "Because today isn't about speeches. It's about enforcement." Within 2 weeks, county inspectors arrived at Timber Ridge carrying copies of the court order. Bright orange notices appeared on the pavilion, the dock, the entrance gate. Every structure inside the disputed boundary, residents gathered quietly behind temporary fencing as demolition crews prepared their equipment. Many looked confused. Some looked angry. A few simply watched in silence, realizing they had trusted paperwork that never should have existed. Sheriff Bennett supervised the first day himself. No shortcuts, he told the contractors. The judge ordered restoration. We're restoring it. Steel bolts came loose from the dock first. Then the decorative stone entrance. Finally, the massive iron gate where Diane had called 911 on Thanksgiving. I stood several yards away as workers lifted it onto a flatbed trailer. It had looked permanent that day. Turns out forged paperwork doesn't make concrete any stronger. Weeks passed. The parking lot disappeared beneath fresh soil. Native grass replaced decorative landscaping. Environmental crews restored the shoreline where unauthorized grading had scarred the lake. Slowly, Mercer Ranch began looking like itself again. One evening, Rebecca drove out carrying a small wooden box. "I thought you'd want this." Inside rested the original government survey monument Owen had recovered beneath the landscaping stones. The steel was weathered. The government stamp remained clear. Owen helped me reset it exactly where his survey established it belonged. Fresh concrete surrounded its base. When it hardened, the monument stood straighter than it had in decades. Sheriff Bennett removed his hat. Most people would have settled. I looked across the quiet water. My grandfather spent his whole life protecting this place. I couldn't sell the truth for convenience. He smiled. "Glad you didn't." After everyone left, I walked alone to the lakeshore. The pavilion was gone. The music was gone. The false boundary was gone. Only the lake remained. Calm. Unchanged. As if it had simply waited for someone to remember whose land it had always reflected. I rested one hand on the survey monument. My grandfather's note echoed in my mind. If they move the canyon markers, they'll steal everything. He had been right, but he had also left behind something stronger than stolen ground. He left records, patience, and the belief that truth survives longer than deception. The law hadn't given my family the ranch back. It had simply recognized what had never been lost. The lake never forgot where its true shoreline belonged. And in the end, neither did justice.
The biggest lesson I carry away from this wasn't that the judge always appeal quickly. It was that just only matter if someone is willing to protect it with patience, honest records, and steady determination. My grandfather couldn't finish the line himself, but left behind the documents, the powdery markers, and the quiet wisdom to never let confusion replace fresh. In the end, it was an angel that restored the land. It was careful evidence, respect for the law, and refusing to give up when the fight seemed longer than expected. There's something composing about us. Building can go up, things can advance, and people can make confident claims. But real ownership, real integrity, and real character aren't decided by the loudest voice in the room. They're revealed over time, especially when someone chooses to stand calm instead of reacting in the heat of the moment. Now, I'd love to hear from you. If you believe it wasn't worth standing up for what's right, even when it takes patience, try just start in the comment. A simple comment one. If you work hard, keep fighting with faith instead of anger. And zero, if you think you work hard, walk away. I always enjoy reading your door and experience because so many of the stories reflect challenges people have faced in real life. And it's story about ranges, land rights, HOA conflicts, and ordinary people standing with quite courage are your kind of story. It'd be honored to have you here. Consider surprising and joining us for the next story. Until then, take care of yourself, take care of the people you love, and never underestimate the value of keeping the just on your side.